Welcome back. I am playing Warhammer 40,000 Battlesector, and today I will continue on with our faction versus faction guide videos. Today I'm going to discuss the Astra Militarum versus the Adepta Sororitas. I'm actually going to have two different builds because it's going to depend on whether the makers, being Slytherin, actually fix the Adepta Sororitas because they're kind of broken right now. And I think my build would really depend on if they're going to continue to be broken or if they're going to actually spend a little bit of time on fixing some of the units and their bugs, because I think that would really affect the kind of build that you would do. But first, if you're enjoying these videos, please give my channel a like and subscribe, because we post more content for you. And if you're struggling with any certain faction matchups and you want me to give you some examples on some army versus army matchups, let me know and I can give you some example builds to go against those factions with anything that you would be interested in. So certainly let me know. But for this here, I think this can be generally a pretty difficult matchup, but you do have some tools to help you counteract the Adepta Sororitas here. The big thing you got to realize is you need to kill the units you're attacking. You don't want to just be stacking up lots of low-tier attacks, or else it's just going to help the Adepta Sororitas build up a lot of evasion, and that's going to make it even harder for you to get the kill, okay? Now, I'm finding that a lot less of the players now are doing a big Rhino rush build, which used to be in the past. They bring either their immolators or their rhinos, would run guys in there and then unload in front of you, so then you'd want to bring high tier killing vehicles to help you kill those rhinos, because if you could kill the rhinos before they unloaded, or if they popped a lot of smoke, then you could do major damage to your opponent before they would be able to get into combat with you. And then if their rhino was around their vehicle or around their other infantry, when that vehicle exploded, then all of a sudden you'd have done significant damage to a lot of the units that were around there. So some players, like myself, still like to actually use a build like that. But I do find that now, especially that most people are understanding how broken the jump infantry are, they're electing to just go very jump infantry heavy and then bypass the rhino, or just bring one rhino, so then you can stack the smoke onto the Seraphim and Zephyrim, which are broken with their evasion, and then you're giving them 15 additional evasion, and that's becoming a very difficult issue for people to get past, okay? So, and then the other thing is you got to realize that the Adepta Sororitas are going to want to be stacking up their buffs. So they're going to want to either use their command HQ commander to then give themselves the accuracy crit buffs, the increased movement, or the increased damage and armor piercing. So you need to be very cognizant of that. And a few flamers can go a long way with the Adepta Sororitas, so generally I find that an infantry build does not work very well, even though theoretically it seems like it really should. But because most people are going to bring a few flamers, they're going to just totally liquidate all of your infantry in front of you. And then the Zephyrim are going to have access to their bolt pistols, which are going to allow them to just totally destroy any infantry that you have in front of you. And then the Seraphim, depending on what kind of build they have, they may also be able to really counteract your infantry as well. So as an Adeptus, an Astra Militarum player, you need to find out where their HQ commander is and make sure to assassinate them. And you have a lot of tools to allow you to do that pretty effectively, as long as they don't have them hiding behind cover. And then getting kills on your opponents here before they're able to take you down. Now, a lot of players are still bringing out Celestians over the Dominions, which I think is a huge mistake, because I think as a Astra Militarum player, you should be much more scared of the Dominions than you should be the Seraphim, unless they're bringing out the Celestians with the Melta guns, then you got to be worried. And the reason is the Dominions have access to the crack grenade, so they can still hurt all your vehicles and take out your infantry. So they're kind of equipped to go no matter what. Whereas the Seraphim or the Celestians are kind of a, one-trick pony. So either they're kitted out to be a very powerful anti-infantry unit, or a very powerful anti-armor unit. So it kind of all depends on the situation here. And then the big thing is with your command point abilities as the Astra Militarum, you can potentially outmaneuver the units by using your Valkyrie transport to help you capture points. You can also potentially use the strafing runs, which I generally don't recommend, especially if the units are having high evasion, because it seems like they miss a lot of attacks. Or at tier 3, you use your Death Strike missile, and that will obliterate anything that's in your way, which can be absolutely amazing. And then again, for the Astra Adepta Sororitas, they're going to be just working on stacking buff on buff on buff, so you need to get your kills, okay? And so because of that, I use this kind of strategy against the Adepta Sororitas. The big thing is it's going to help you focus down and get the kills you need to try to stop them from building up a bunch of evasion. So I go with the tank commander here. I think there's flexibility in this build, so if you want to give them the heavy flamer in case you get charged in by the Zephyrim, then that's definitely very viable. I go both ways with this, so I always leave a little bit of points here to make some changes with the spawns and weapons here, so it kind of is going to have to depend on what your playstyle is. For this, I'm going to assume that you're doing okay, and so it gives you flexibility. Do you want to use the multi-melta to focus down heroes? Do you want to use the plasma cannon to help you shoot down a lot of the medium tier infantry and also has some better damage against vehicles? Do you want to just be able to put out a bunch of attacks against, low tier infantry? Then, the heavy bolter can be okay. This is also really effective against hospitalers to really help you snipe them down. And then obviously the heavy flamer will help you shoot down anybody. And then using the las cannon, you can snipe down those hero units at range or have a good anti-vehicle weapon. And then you have your battle cannon as your default here to help you take out light and medium tier infantry. Works out pretty well. And then I tend to like the shock and awe battle doctrine that he gives because I want to get that 10% damage buff with the range stability, because most of the units I'm going to be using are going to all have high damage potential. So that 10% is going to cause significant increases. And then the pound them to dust is kind of the keystone around this build, is because you want to give your Rogel Dorns, which you're bringing, the double attacks, because you'll give them double the amount of attacks with every weapon at a 10% accuracy penalty here. And so for that means you're going to get double oppressor cannon shots. You're going to have 2 shots here, you're going to have 2 shots here, or if you do the castigator, you're now going to get an additional 80 shots here. Again, so it's just all about doubling up the amount of attacks you're getting. But again, because you're now suffering a penalty to your accuracy, you want to make sure you're not putting it on units that have already been damaged and have those evasion buffs going. Likewise, I like to use the commissars here with their power swords, because at 5 that significantly increases their damage, allowing them to kill any models they're engaging with still doing pretty decent splash damage. They have the ability to execute units, which will then give an AoE effect. So let's say we have one guardsman here, and then everybody around here is surrounding that one guardsman. The momentum bonuses do not go to HQ commanders, so you would want to make sure it's going to sentinels and even other guardsmen here. So you'd execute one model out of this squad of, 10 units here? 9 units? No, 10. And so now they're down to 9, and then in exchange you're giving everybody 30 momentum, which is going to decrease their graze chance and also increase their crit chances, I believe is how it works for the Imperial Guard's momentum bonuses here. So that's pretty significant. And then you can also cast then the Show 'em Steel ability, which will increase your melee damage by 25%. It'll increase your melee damage by 25%, and it'll also increase your critical hit chance by 10% at range. And so this is why you can alternate these back and forth and really do substantial damage. And then if you break cohesion, you need to have another line have some bonuses. Their ability with the Emperor's Will, giving you plus 25% momentum gains and plus 10 bonus health, can be very substantial, especially on very powerful units such as the Rogel Dorn, because that's now an additional 50 health that you're giving your tanks here. And then with all the kind of attacks that you're doing, this can be very, very powerful. So I'm going for a one-hit kill type build, but if you're just doing a sheer amount of shots, this is still highly effective, giving you that 10% crit chance. So going with the Rogaldorns here, again, you have to decide what you want. I like to bring the Oppressor Cannon. That way I have some very powerful single attack shots to help me snipe down HQ units or other vehicles. Some people like to use the Twin Battle Cannons because that will allow you to do substantial damage against the infantry units and help you really shoot down those Seraphim and Seraphim when they're coming in at you. But the big thing you got to remember, some people forget, is when you're doing Overwatch, you don't get the splash damage. You just have your base damage, which I always thought was pretty stupid. But that is how Slytherin has set this up. So having that single damage Oppressor Cannon damage will allow you to pretty reliably snipe down and get a model kill on anybody that's moving through. Now again, I'm assuming you haven't stacked up all their evasion, so because of that, I really like to have the Pulverizer Cannon, because if you land 1 to 2 of those attacks, you're going to totally squad wipe any infantry that the Astra Militarum are going to be bringing, or the Adepta Sororitas are going to be bringing at you, so it's going to really help you drop down those Seraphim, or snipe out HQ commanders. I think you could make a pretty strong argument that going with the 80 shots here with pretty decent damage and armor piercing may be a better option if you just want to have the most accuracy, especially if in the amount of kills, especially if you're going to be charged at and not having protection. Then if they close the distance, the Castigator Cannon will be much better, because you're, especially with 100% accuracy or 100% extra attacks, you know, that's 160 attacks here, so that should allow you to squad wipe anybody you're shooting at, even if they have pretty good evasion. So again, you just got to kind of know your play style here. Likewise, I usually go with a heavy bolter just because it allows me to keep my distance here and keep getting shots. And I find that I don't really need the multi-melta to land those additional kills, because it just overkills most infantry that you're going to be suffering with, and I have enough other anti-armor killing potential that I think just going with the heavy bolters makes more sense to help me get a couple more model kills. And then the heavy stubbers just helps you finish off any units that are close to dying that didn't quite get taken out, or to take out arcoflagellants or other low tier infantry. And then if you have this guy almost killed, then you can drive him and then just use him as an explosive device to take out a lot of infantry as well if you have to. Now, that's never really recommended, but if you're fully surrounded and he's gonna die, then by all means just sacrifice him to get that volatile explosion going, because that will do substantial damage to the Seraphim, and anybody else that's really locking you down. But if you do land all these attacks, you're going to have so much momentum gained in addition to the buffs that you've given, assuming you use the execute ability with the Commissar here, that they should be able to then surge and then get another round of attacks with the Oppressor Cannon. So that means you're getting a total of 4 attacks out of the Oppressor Cannon, so that should allow you to snipe down any vehicles or infantry that you're really trying to take out. So that should work out pretty well. And so again, I do that, all that reasoning, I use the same kind of build twice. If you wanted to alternate them, it's up to you. Now that the Castigator Gatling Cannon versus a Pulverizer are the same amount of points, it gives you some flexibility. And then because of the reasons I've already described, I tend to have a slight preference for the Demolisher Cannon here. But I think you could make a solid argument that going with the Punisher could also be, if not a better option, because it has okay base accuracy, but by having 100 attacks, if you're giving them, you know, the Show 'em Steel, which is giving them a 10% crit chance, plus they're gaining all these momentums, which should increase their crit chance already, that can be very, very powerful for you. And like I said, I leave a little bit of points here because some people may argue that going with heavy flamers makes a lot of sense, and I don't disagree. Some people like to bring the plasma cannon, so it just all depends on your play style. And then by giving yourself these 10 points here, you can just kit them out for however you want, because if all the Seraphim close the distance, attack you, but don't get to kill, then you whip out this heavy flamer, and this should allow you to squad wipe the Seraphim unless they're fully buffed up with the Hospitaller 10% bonus and the increase, the double AP attack, because then they'll have additional bonus health that following turn as well. And then even if this grazes, it still does pretty decent damage against a unit. So again, it all depends on your playstyle. And then again, I like to bring the Armored Sentinels because it usually takes at least 2 Seraphim attacks or 2 Seraphim attacks, and then they're going to be right next to you. And so even if they kill you, you're going to explode and then have those guys weakened for the following turn for your Flamers to finish them off, or to run in with a bunch of Cadian shock troops, and then you can just throw out your frag grenades, and those are typically enough to squad wipe anybody that's left over that wasn't flat out killed by your Flamer attacks or the explosion. So it actually makes these Cadians be pretty decent. And then the other thing to be aware of, I don't know why I gave them the melee build here. Guess I'm just using up my points here. But the other thing to be aware of is that because they have the las guns, they have so many different shots that they have actually a pretty decent chance of causing suppression against Seraphim and Seraphim that may be charging in, especially if they're using their charge attack. So these guys can actually be pretty beneficial for you. So that's kind of why I like to move these guys around, so you have your increased movement with your Sentinels capturing points and then flaming down any infantry that are in your way, and then either body blocking the locations with the Cadians or just getting whipping out a bunch of grenades to help killing anybody that's in your way. So I think that's pretty effective. Again, assuming they're not going to fix the broken builds right now, my alternative second build would be something like this, where I'd bypass the Rogaldorms and just go for a heavy flamer build. So I would end up using the either a Demolisher variant or a Punisher variant. You have to just decide which one is better for you. Again, if you haven't stacked up a bunch of evasion, then the Demolisher will just squad wipe anybody you're shooting into. If the evasion has already started to occur, though, the Punisher is much better because you still have those 100 shots when you're doing the Overwatch, giving you additional opportunities to get some kills, and you have all those crit chance opportunities, and then you just give them some heavy flamers to just roll in there, get a squad wipe there, get some squad wipes with the flamers, and just do a bunch of damage, and then still have your las cannons available to snipe out enemy vehicles. Or heroes that may be out in the open to allow you to get the most kills here. And then you have a heavy flamer build with your 4 sentinels here to help you snipe down any Seraphim or Seraphim that have decided to charge in after you. And then the units that are either weakened by the explosions or by the flamers not getting the kill if they're fully buffed. Then you have 5 Cadians here to then use the frag grenades to finish them off. You can also use the Cadians to body block your tanks to stop the Seraphim from being able to charge in there, and then you can have your sentinels on the outskirts with just some Overwatch flame attacks, so that should prevent the Seraphim from being able to get in there, because the Seraphim, if they have the Infernal Pistols, I think those have a range of 2, so they have to move in through your Sentinel Flamers. And if the Seraphim want to do significant damage without their pistols, then they have to get into that range 2 as well. And then this should allow you to squad wipe most units that are moving in, attacking you, and do just substantial damage. So in the current phase, I like this build much more. In the optimal phase, I would like to do the double Rogaldorm build, but like I said, currently I think this build is much more effective just for the sheer amount of heavy flamers you can build. And then if you want to use the heavy weapons sponsons, then you just drop one of the Cadian shock troops, and then you can kit everybody out with the flamers. So you just have to know what kind of build you want to use and how you're going to kill your opponent. But I find this to be very effective against the Adepta Sororitas using a heavy jump infantry build. I think this one works a little bit better than the first build, but I find the first build to be a little more enjoyable to play, just because you just have so much killing potential with all those big meaty tanks. It just makes it feel like the real Adeptus Astra Militarum playstyle. So Alternative options here, I think the Psyker can be extremely powerful against the Adepta Sororitas. You can use the Night Shroud ability, which will give your tanks 20% evasion. It makes it so they can't be suppressed. It makes them immune to Overwatch, and also makes them immune to Overwatch zone of controls with melee. And it prevents all reaction fire. So this allows you to just drive a tank that's either you want to move through a bunch of Overwatch, especially if there's like multi-meltas out there. You can just drive right through it and then just get the kill. Likewise, if a bunch of Seraphim move in there and they're trying to lock you down and you don't want to be in that location, you just pop the Night Shroud and you can just drive right out of there and not have to worry about it. Now, one interesting thing is it seems like the pistols still will shoot. So I don't know if the Seraphim Infernal pistols would be activated. If they did, that would be absolute nightmare. But I have noticed that the Seraphim with their bolt pistols, they do tend to still attack. So it's just the melee zone of control, not a range zone of control. So just be aware of that, because that can feel real bad if you're not aware of it. You can also do the mental shackles, which will stop somebody from being able to escape your counterattack, and also lower their accuracy, which can be real nice if somebody has a very powerful ranged unit that they're attacking you with. And then the other thing is you can use the Psychic Maelstrom, and you can force this to be right on the outskirts of your tank line. And so if the Seraphim want to move in there and get the attack, they'll have to move through the Psychic Maelstrom, which will lower their movement, and also the following turn they'll suffer 30 damage per model that's in the Psychic Maelstrom ability, and that will finish them off, assuming you had a flamer or they killed your vehicle. Between the damage that they'll suffer between that explosion and the Psychic Maelstrom, that should just destroy anybody that's in your way. And so for that reason, I really like using the Primaris Psykers. Now, the big thing is they're just very, very at risk of getting sniped against the charge abilities with the Zephyrim, so just keep them at range. And then they actually have a very powerful melee attack too, which can help you attack not only vehicles, but elite tier infantry, so that can help you get some kills, because it does have an armor piercing of 8. Another unit that's a good alternative, I think, are the Kasrkin. I think both options are actually pretty viable. I like the basic setup here, even though they have slightly less range, because you have the option to deploy the Melta-Mines. And if you can get these guys to be in a position where you're forcing the Adepta Sororitas to move into your location, then that Melta-Mine will do substantial damage against vehicles or against the Seraphim, because it does have some splash damage, doing pretty decent damage. Alternatively, if you want to use like a very heavy infantry build, which I have yet to see be very effective in large numbers against the Astra Adepta Sororitas, then doing the hotshot volley gun can be a little bit better, because you get yourself 4 optimal range. And then with the sheer amount of shots that you'd have with these guys, they would be able to usually suppress any Seraphim that are charging into you. So that can be very nice to just help him waste some attacks with activating some Overwatches. Interestingly, I have seen some people, I usually say that this is a never bring, but I've actually played a couple opponents now, in fact one of which was on the tournament, and the Basilisk definitely almost paid for itself. You use the barrage ability to get those 3 ranged attacks, and if your opponent is all globbed together because they haven't quite moved out yet, then that'll allow you to potentially get 3 attacks. If they have all 9 people grouped together, then you just deploy this, and it's going to guarantee you 3 attacks, which are very nice, full damage, and that will almost squad wipe any infantry that are hit by it. And then you can follow it up with steady aim by not moving them, and then that'll give you additional accuracy. And then when you're actually landing attacks, you get that ingrained precision, which will give you 5 additional accuracy per stack, which can be real nice towards the end. And then whether you're landing shots or missing, you have the risk of having the high explosives going off, causing some splash damage, and the artillery, if they miss, then they'll scatter and potentially do full damage to anybody it scatters to. So That can be very nice. And then you have the heavy bolter as well, for an alternative attack if you have somebody that's almost dead or they're moving in too close where the Earthshaker cannon can't go off. That can work out pretty advantageous for you. And then obviously the Chimera can be very good. If you want to have the melee charge, you can certainly do this, but for the most part, I recommend just the standard kit. So you have the free flamer attack every 3 turns, and then you have the multi-laser to finish off any units that are close to dying, and then they are forced to have to use heavy armor piercing attacks to kill down that Chimera. And again, once it's almost been killed, if you can drive it near the enemy lines that have zone of control that are all grouped together, then you can just use this guy as a explosive killer with the volatile ability, just driving it in and then getting it killed on a zone of control if there's a bunch of Seraphim or Seraphim all grouped together. So units I tend not to bring. I don't like a Castellan. If you're going to do a heavy infantry build, which I have not seen be very effective against the Adepta Sororitas, then the Castellan can make sense because of her ability to give you plus 10% accuracy, plus 1 base damage. That really helps improve the damage of your Flamers or your Kasserkin and other rapid fire units, or your bolters, all that kind of stuff. It really helps, but as I do more of an elite build, I don't find that to be particularly helpful for me. I find that the move is not super advantageous unless you want to use that to rapidly capture points on very big maps. And then yes, the bring it down can be very powerful. They buffed up the range, which is very nice, helping you get past some of that evasion, but for the most part at 180 points I find that she just gets sniped too easily, and I can't belt out all these abilities fast enough to make her pay for herself. Likewise, I don't find that the Cadian Sergeant tends to pay for himself. I find that the 10% ranged accuracy just gets overwhelmed by the evasion bonuses, and then I don't find that the ranged armor take it cover ability helps you enough. The las pistol doesn't do enough damage and have armor piercing to help you get through the armor that most of the Adepta Sororitas units are going to be using. And then while the chainsword is good and does decent damage, I find that he misses too many attacks that it's just not worthwhile. Likewise, I feel like the Ogryn should be good by having a very powerful Ripper bayonet to help you fight powerful vehicles, and then their Ripper guns are quite good at doing damage, but once the evasion starts stacking up, it tends to miss too many attacks, and then these guys don't have enough armor to be able to survive flamers, which there's usually an abundance of, and everything else that has high damage potential can easily kill these Ogryn squads. And if you're going to try to use their Furious charge ability, then you're going to trigger overwatches and reaction fires, and because these guys don't have enough armor and their grace chance is not great enough, they'll just take too much damage. So I don't find for 110 points that these guys work out for me. Likewise, I find the heavy weapon squads to be too difficult. The las cannon variant will help you definitely assassinate any heroes or vehicles that would be at range, which can be very nice, especially if you've had them stacking up their set-em-ups to give them very significant accuracy. The auto cannon seems like it should be amazing, but I find that they just miss too many of their shots, and it takes too long to get those setup squads. And then again, the heavy weapon squad default with a missile launcher, frag and crack can be good, but I just find that these guys are too easy to be killed. You know, it's one flamer shot and one attack from anybody else. We'll just totally squad wipe these guys, or getting attacked by a cannonist. So I just find that I'd rather have more mobile units than having guys that I have to sit down and just deploy and then stack these setup abilities to get them to pay for themselves. So I just find that to be too difficult to use. But if you're on a map where there's going to be obvious alleyways that are going to be big kill zones, you know, deploying one of these guys down there and then having some very good guaranteed damage can be very nice. But for the most part, I just find that they get killed too much, and I just rarely get them to get 100 points worth of damage to pay for themselves. So I hope that gives you some idea on how to play against the Adepta Sororitas. Like I said, I think this second build works much better in the current phase just because the jump infantry are so broken right now. Because what happens, I guess I didn't specifically say it on this example, is the Grace ability is supposed to only be activated the turn that they use their jump packs, but what's happening is once you end a turn with the jump pack ability activated, that Grace ability just sticks around, giving them 10% ranged accuracy and 10% evasion. And then with the Zephyrim already having a base accuracy of 15, or a base evasion of 15, that then brings them up to a base evasion of 25. And then you throw the smoke screen on top of there. Now you're up to 40 evasion, and then you start stacking the evasion that they're getting when they're taking damage, and it's not uncommon for them to spend the rest of the match being somewhere around 40 to 60 evasion, and it just makes it really, really hard for any range shots to take those guys down that aren't guaranteed. And that's why it's so powerful to have these flamers. Is one, it's 100% accuracy and it bypasses the evasion and almost kills them, and then two, if somebody does get into combat with them, you explode and do substantial damage to them and allow you to get the kill. So that's why the jump infantry are so broken right now for the Adepta Sororitas. I hope that they're going to finally fix that Grace ability. It's always been a bug, but the Seraphim aren't so powerful that it felt just overwhelming, so I think people were bitching about it, but it wasn't a major issue. But now that the Seraphim are here with 10 extra evasion, and then having the melee abilities to give a melee zone of control, locking down a lot of ranged units, and having that charge 9 area, it just makes it feel very, very overwhelming for most matchups. And so thankfully, the Adeptus Astra Militarum can counter it with their heavy flamers, but it can definitely feel real bad, and you gotta kind of build things to take that into consideration. So with that, I hope that helps you have a lot of success playing as the Astra Militarum against the Adepta Sororitas. It's definitely a little bit of an uphill battle, but you have the tools to really punish them, and you have a lot of different builds that would be pretty viable depending on how you want to play. So with that, I'm going to sign off for the day. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you are, please give my channel a like and subscribe to encourage me to post more content for you. Have a great day.